Welcome to yet another session where we continue our discussion on the latest developments in the medical device industry. Our topic for today's focuses on subject that's becoming increasingly critical across medtech landscape, cybersecurity. But before we begin, let me briefly introduce myself. I am Varun Trivedi, the founder of easyQ Solutions, where our mission is to build a smart EQMS platform tailored to address the compliance and regulatory needs of the medtech industry. Joining with me today is Mike Hiltz. Mike joins us from Bington, Michigan, where he lives with his wife and young daughter. Before beginning his career in cybersecurity and health technology, Mike proudly served as a United States Army Ranger, an experience that shaped his leadership style and commitment to mission driven excellence. Today, Mike serves as Chief Information Security Officer at nference and Anumana. In his role, where he leads the organization's efforts to safeguard data and systems that power cutting edge advances in digital healthcare. Anumana, one of the companies he supports, has developed an FDA approved software as a medical device that uses ECG data to detect low ejection fraction, a groundbreaking innovation in cardiovascular care. We are thrilled to have Mike with us today to share his insights and experience at the intersection of cybersecurity, AI, and healthcare innovation. Mike, welcome to our webinar. It's an absolute pleasure to have you with us today and to have you share your insights on the very important topic of cybersecurity. Mike.
Thanks, Varun. Thanks for having me, and I'm looking forward to the conversation and discussion.
Awesome. Okay, so Mike, cybersecurity, right? I mean, what is happening nowadays? I believe the day is not far where even implants are going to have something to do with AI, right? When you talk about implants, stents, and all, I think that day is not far that even they are going to have AI. AI is pretty much everywhere, right? And when we go into AI, when we talk about, as they say, right, health data is becoming the next gold or diamond in the overall stream of things, right? When we talk about AI, when you talk about software, when you see the amount of advancement that is happening in the AI, in the software side, right? Um, Cybersecurity, but obvious, becomes very, very important, right? What my question would be, right, is let's take cybersecurity from a SaMD perspective, right? Uh, According to you, what is cybersecurity in the most simplest way, and what are the key elements that a company should consider or focus on when they are talking about cybersecurity from regulated SAMD kind of environment? Mike.
Yeah, cybersecurity. Traditionally, you're thinking about protecting data, right? So you have data or systems. In the case of a SAMD, what you're really trying to do is ensure patient safety, right? So you want to make sure that the device is safe, that it's reliable. When you factor in things like AI and ML, you want to make sure that you have consistent behavior, that the model, again, behaves safely. You're always having to consider patient risk, patient harm as part of that development. So from a software as a medical device perspective, you do have to look at it very broadly, not just protecting data, confidentiality, privacy, but also that patient.
Good. And Mike, when we talk about cybersecurity, very often when I am talking to companies which are dealing with AI or are with software or have developed mobile health application, right? I do ask them, hey, how's your cybersecurity and what are you doing with cybersecurity? The one thing that keeps coming to me when I use the word cybersecurity is this four-letter term called VAPT, right? So their immediate answer for my cybersecurity question is that, hey, we have our VAPT done. What is VAPT, and is doing VAPT all that takes around cybersecurity?
Yeah. So vulnerability assessment, penetration testing, right? Typical. I've checked my code. We've performed some penetration testing. We're great, right? No issues. We can move forward. We check the box. It's critical. Don't get me wrong. It's critical. But that's not that's really a point in time view of the product or your software as a medical device or your infrastructure, right? It's a great snapshot. But there's a lot more that goes into that, right? So cybersecurity isn't just VAPT. It covers your governance. You have to, from a product perspective, you should be continually testing. You have to think about things like your software bill of materials, your supply chain, the libraries. Say you're incorporating open source code, right? What libraries are you incorporating in that product? Are they secure? Have you done a review of the licenses that are part of that open source? So there's a lot more that goes into cybersecurity, governance. When you start looking at things like machine learning, what models are you bringing in? How were they trained? Uh, are they reliable? From a medical device standpoint, obviously, it becomes even more critical. Again, looking at that patient safety. So cybersecurity is broad. And it also could possibly include some of the organizational controls that come into play. Things like your identity and access management. How are you managing credentials, tokens? So there's a lot more that you have to do aside from VAPT.
One question, you mentioned about libraries, right? You mentioned about open source libraries. In 62304, right? The standard that is widely again followed in the medical device industry for from the software lifecycle processes perspective. There's a term called SOUP, right, which is software of unknown provenance. Uh, what is it all about? Like, why controlling or managing open source library is so important? And in a software, Mike, there might be hundreds of libraries. Do I go and literally take each one of them and try to put security around them? How practically, how do I approach them? So first question is, why are they important from a cybersecurity perspective? And second question is, if they are important, and if I have a software where I am using practically so many libraries, right, how do I put those control around them?
Yeah, so obviously you have multiple contributors. Great recent examples, bad actors modifying open source libraries or being given access to update specific open source libraries, injecting malware into that code. So it is very important. Every single library that you're pulling in, you have to ensure that it's been evaluated, that who the developers of that software are, if it's maintained, that they're doing regular, again, they're going to be doing their own VAPT. So they're going to be making code modifications, doing that validation, ensuring that they're patching for vulnerabilities. So you have to make sure that the libraries are maintained, that there's
Mm-hmm,
active development, and that you trust the
mm-hmm,
developers of that software.
mm-hmm. So, Mike, from a practical perspective, right? So again, I'm just staying on this topic and asking a
Sure.
couple of more questions. One thing is, so for me, when I have been interacting with software developers, I understand there are two type of libraries. One is that you don't know the identity, or you don't know how the library has been developed. It is openly available, freely available on the web. You download it. It has been used vastly by my friends in different companies, and hence I can use it, right? So that's one approach. Second is, there are certain libraries which, for example, let's say there is something that Google might be offering you, or Microsoft might be offering you, a very well-known company who have done that, who have their own development process, and they charge a free fee, or something of that sort, from where you can procure and still integrate it with your code, right? When I look at these two differences, right, from a security perspective, do you still give the same weightage in the way you put your controls or implement your controls for both of them, or do you differ your controls between the two? Thoughts?
No, I weight them the same. Large companies are just as susceptible, right,
Mm-hmm,
to uh, source code manipulation, the insider threat. It's not just threat actors. Again, large companies have had breaches. Large companies
mm-hmm,
have had
mm-hmm,
bad actors make modifications. So I really think that you have to look at it very broadly. You have your
mm-hmm,
soup, your S-bomb, right? So we talked a little bit
mm-hmm,
about S-bomb. You should be continually scanning that. You should also
mm-hmm,
be subscribing to feeds that
mm-hmm,
indicate when certain libraries have been that have had vulnerabilities identified. I have a Slack channel where we basically subscribe to RSS feeds, and
Mm-hmm.
any of the software that we're using, some of our major suppliers, I get notifications when they have identified issues, whether it's a vulnerability, they've had a breach, any of those things. ISOC is a great resource
Mm-hmm.
for identifying Meta ISAO. So if
Mm-hmm.
you join some of these ISAOs, they're also going to send you information about potential vulnerabilities
Mm-hmm.
in software that you're using or libraries that you're using.
Got it. And Mike, when you're talking, you also mentioned about organizational controls. How does organizational control feed into cybersecurity? What does that have to do with cybersecurity?
Sure. Organizational controls, ISO 27001, great kind of reference for the beginnings. And really, if we talk about organizational controls, you do have to have that pillar, right? What are you going to build your program around? Um,
Mm-hmm.
and I'll talk about how that intersects with things like ISO 1345, your quality management system, or 42001, the new uh, uh, AI guidance, right? So let's talk
Yeah.
about those.
Yes. Yeah.
So
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, organizational controls, ISO 27001, great start. It is where you're basically how you're doing business and taking a look at your overall business risk, applying some framework to mitigate those risks. And what you're going to do is you're going to have things like your HR, your legal, your IT, broadly kind of your software development from how are you training developers, how are you um, ensuring people understand what cybersecurity is, security awareness. All of that's going to be part of that organizational control. Obviously, we all have laptops we're working off of. How is IT managing those laptops? So ISO 27001 has a set of annexes or controls that you're implementing. You take that as the framework, and then within that, obviously, now you're going to be very specific about what are you developing from a product standpoint. So that FDA approved device, that SaMD, now you're going to have a set of very strict and specific SOPs for that product, right? But it's still going to fall under that overall ISO 27001 organizational set of controls, right? You have policies, you have procedures and guidance, and then you have very tightly
Mike, we
controlled.
lost you.
Oh, I am still here.
Lost you. Can you hear me?
I can. You faded out on me, so I don't know if it was
Okay.
me or you.
Even I'm figuring that out. Okay, I think we have it now back.
Okay.
Okay, so you mentioned about 27001, the controls around
Yep.
27001. Uh, 27001. Similarly, when an organization, so a good start, I understand 27001 is a good start for people to build their frameworks, workflows, put the things going on the security side, right? Similarly, if I am an organization which is 27001 certified, does that mean that, hey, from a cybersecurity perspective, I am all sorted? Is that perception correct?
No.
If I have a company which is 27001 certified, can I come to you and say, hey, you know what, 27001 certified, here's is my certification, cybersecurity tick mark? Is that the right way of looking at things?
No, it really, and you have to look at the scope, right? So all of these certifications have a specific scope that you've defined. So first and foremost, what was the scope of that certification? Was it a particular product that you have under scope? Was it the entire organization? Was it everything that you do from a software development standpoint, or as a business? So no. And I also think, right, so we talked a little bit about the QMS, ISO 1345. Now you're really getting into the product. What are you purchasing from us, and how is that being managed and developed, especially when it comes to the FDA regulated device? You're going to have a ISO 27001. Yep, the organization's probably doing things correctly, and their IT team's doing things that they should be doing. They have some controls in place, but no, it doesn't mean that it's the say all be all for cybersecurity. You really need to understand the broader picture, especially when it comes to a software as a medical device.
Got it. And if from again from a more practical perspective, right? If I am a 27001 certified company, right? And especially this is more for a smaller organization who are trying to build their put their security practice in place. They're trying to learn new things. Many times they have this notion that hey, you know what? If I'm 27001 certified, I can get going with things, right? Which to some extent might be okay, but then there are limits, right? if if we purely talk about 27001, right, and if I try to implement 27001 in, let's say, my company, right, uh what elements do you think would be broadly missed out, or what are those key aspects, from again purely from a cybersecurity perspective, that you will miss out if you only focus on 27001 and not look at the wider picture?
Yeah, I think the very specific controls. Again, there are other standards that may be more applicable to your
Mm-hmm,
business. SOC 2, for instance, in the
mm-hmm,
U.S.
mm-hmm,
is something that people look at, because there you can map those controls to specific um, elements within your. Say you're hosted in the cloud. You have AWS, or you're using Google Cloud, right? There are specific controls that you're going to want to implement to protect your cloud infrastructure, your data in the cloud. So I think that you have, while ISO 27001 is great, and don't get me wrong, it's going to get your foot in the door, especially when it comes to
mm-hmm,
commercialization, right?
mm-hmm,
When you want to go sell into a customer, they're going to ask you for specific certifications, ISO 27001 being one of them, because it
mm-hmm,
really says something about your organization. You've taken that step to ensure that as an organization, you're doing, you've started that process, right? And that's, I really say you started that process, because again, it really comes down to the scope of that certification, and then again, what are you trying to do from a business standpoint? Is it a software as a medical device? Do you have a cloud solution? Then you're going to want to look at things, especially if you're in the healthcare space, right? HIPAA, high trust. High
mm-hmm,
trust, that's a very rigorous framework, right? 300 plus
mm-hmm.
controls.
Sure.
We're actually doing high trust now. So almost 300 controls for an I1. And it's very, very specific. Each control has a focus, whether it's a cloud solution, a software solution, and it's very prescriptive, right? You have to meet a very specific standard. ISO 27001, not so much, more
Mm-hmm,
organizational. How are you managing the overall
mm-hmm.
business? Product specific. Now you have to have those other certifications and frameworks in place, and you have to have the controls in place.
Anumana is in the US. Anumana has got a US FDA. I mean, one of the product has a US FDA approval, right? And then Anumana also has the product also has a CE marking.
Yep.
When we look at different geographies, right? You mentioned about SOC 2 and you mentioned about US, right? When I
Mhm.
look at different geographies, is it true? And so, is it true that based on geographies, your security controls are also going to vary? Point number one. Point number two, to what extent do they vary, or how much is the overlap? If let's say I'm doing SOC 2 or HIPAA for the US, right, and then I go to the EU for, let's say, GDPR, right, is there how much of overlap in your experience have you seen when we go from different geographies?
Yeah, I think you do have to consider it. GDPR obviously is more on the privacy side, right? So you're talking
Hmm,
about
hmm.
PI, mostly PII, not the
Yeah, correct.
PHIS, but really it's privacy. That's one
Hmm,
component of SOC 2. I mean, it's limited, but I do think that, and then the US, right? We have 50 states and probably 30 now different privacy laws per state, because we don't have a
sure,
federal privacy law in the US. And you have DPDP coming in India, right? So
sure.
uh, I think you have to take the the strictest, and depending on where you want to do business, you kind of take that
Hmm.
strictest standard, GDPR being one of them, and at least try to meet that standard. Now there are variations, and I've leveraged AI, right? So machine learning has been great for me. Um, Taking the requirements of each and doing a mapping, right? So map GDPR to CCPA, for instance, California and the US. How do they differ? Which is the stricter standard, and trying to apply that, if you're going to be selling in California, doing business in California with a lot of individuals, Now you have to meet that standard, right? Or you have a certain threshold of revenue. Now CCPA comes into play. GDPR, same thing. Take a look at that. And really, I do that for all of the standards now. Take that mapping, try to do a cross section, and have a matrix that really says what's the common denominator, and what standard do I have to meet to make sure that I'm compliant with GDPR, that I'm compliant with this other DPDP or CCPA.
So it goes without saying that you need to comply. It's like, when you want to sell your product into the US, you need to comply to US FDA, for EU CE marking, India CDS. You need to get all your approvals per region or per country, right? But let's say from a if I as a startup needs to start somewhere, right, what would be your advice? Which is that one standard or compliance practice that I should target and start walking in that direction and then build over it, right? Should I directly go for HIPAA? Should I directly go for, I know this answer might be more driven by the business, I mean, based on where I want to do business, but in your experience, if assuming that's not the concern for a minute, how would you recommend I develop my security frameworks, and then eventually mature into the global requirements?
Yeah, I really do think business drives it, or it should, right? So that's the ultimate goal, right? Is to be able to commercialize and do business somewhere, and it really depends on the type of data that you're working with. So if you're working with healthcare data, obviously HIPAA comes into play. If you're developing a software as a medical device, then now you have some additional standards, right? FDA, CE. So I would say that determine what the product's going to be, what your business is going to be, and then understand what the requirements would be from your customers, from regulatory bodies, and apply those, right? I think that you have to start there. What are you trying to accomplish from a business standpoint? Are you going to be selling in the US primarily? Are you going to be selling in Europe primarily? Because that will kind of dictate whether or not you go with either a SOC 2, for instance. Are you going to be cloud hosted? Because that is what customers are going to look for if you're hosting in the cloud. If you're going to do HIPAA, now you may want to look at something like a high trust to start, because that's a
Mhm.
stricter framework. But you do have to. I think you do have to take a look at the business and then pick a framework to go with. And again, leverage that cross mapping. Maybe you can take certain pieces of various frameworks, but you're still going to want to do some type of certification, because that's going to get your foot in the door from a commercial standpoint.
So, Mike, one more very basic question, but still very important question is, and this again, in my experience, I'll share with you. What I've seen is, when I talk to companies and I look into their cybersecurity practices and all, although they would have started with the famous VAPT, but many a times I see that their reports are like 2 years old, and when I talk to them, they say, what, but the software has not changed, right? So the report is still valid, right? Um, According to you, how, I mean, things like VAPT, right? Things like security evaluation, things like even your security architecture, SBOM, right? Then we spoke about the libraries, right? Controls on libraries. I mean, is this one-time activity? Is this something that needs to be done over a period of time? I mean, what should be your typical ideal approach towards this entire process?
Yeah. So obviously, it's a continuous process, right? It's iterative, just like any ISO, right? They expect continuous improvement always. So that's how your cybersecurity should be as well. So you're going to want to do an initial VAPT, sure, because that's going to identify right now what you have to work with. But you're going to be introducing new code. You're going to be making modifications. Configuration changes are going to happen. You're going to have third-party dependencies. We talked about these libraries. So this should be an always going continuous process. Uh,
True.
Cloud controls, right? Same thing, continuously evaluating. You have software developers, they're going to make mistakes. They're going to upload a token somewhere where they shouldn't, right? They're going to have credentials leaked somewhere. It's going to happen. They're going to make a configuration mistake, and you're going to have an open port somewhere. So this should be an ongoing, continuous process.
Got it. So, guys who are listening to us, please make sure that your cybersecurity processes are updated. You need to have a continuous review of that. It's actually similar to your document management, which also needs to be reviewed on a periodic basis. But yeah, agreed with you. And you know what, Mike? I've been some of the pre-subs, some of the FDA pre-subs, and you're bang on, because even FDA, although it's not written somewhere, not defined, but they also prefer that your when you submit your reports, right, your VAPTs, or I mean other bench tests, they should typically be within like 6 months or a year kind of a period while you are going for the submission. So with you on that, and it's very important, and it's a continuous process, like you mentioned, right? Another very important aspect of when we talk about security from a process perspective, right, Mike, is the whole concept of threat model, right? This is also something that I have not heard many people talk about. Typically, when you, again, as I said in the beginning, when you talk about cybersecurity and topic about cybersecurity, it's typically two things that comes out. One is VAPT and second is 27th, right? Threat model. What is threat model? Why is it important?
Yeah, I mean, it should be your foundation, right? A threat model is going to be something where you're identifying where you could have potential threats, right? Whether it's in
Hmm.
your cloud architecture, whether it's in the software itself. So you can use frameworks like Stride, for instance, and that's typically what most people are doing. Um, so basically, what you're trying to do is ensure that you've considered all possible risks, whether it's configuration risk. Maybe you have a risk because you have a specific port open or a specific protocol. What files are being written and stored? Where could you possibly have to do things like encryption? Um, so those are the things that you're going to do in that threat model. You really want to have that right off the bat, right? That should be something that you do in your design, right? This shouldn't be something you do later. This is something you do in that product design and development. And then you can start considering risks around those threats. And risks obviously are, especially when you're looking at SaMD again, you have to be able to explain how you've addressed those risks. Have you mitigated them? Are they still residual risks? How are you handling those? So that's all going to be part of something you have to do in that development. So your threat model is your foundation.
Hmm. When we and is this also something that you do over time? You keep looking into it. It's a continuously ongoing activity, or it is again something that I do one time?
No, obviously if something changes, right? So anytime you have an architecture change or a change to how you're deploying that solution or
Mhm,
something that you've
mhm.
changed in the product itself, now you're going to want to go back and reassess. Did we open up a new port? Do we have a new library? So you're going to, that's a continuous process again. Obviously the threat model really happens, the vast majority of it during that initial design and development. But beyond that, you have to continually go back to that. Have you made a change? Now we have to go back and reassess that threat model. Have we captured everything?
You have been part of the whole SaMD software side of things, sorry, medical device side of things. You have been part of the FDA, submissions and all with Anumana, and you have also been part of something very important, which is ISO 13485, right? The whole foundation of medical device QMS, right? Uh, where does cybersecurity fit in the whole gambit of 13485? Where do you see the intersection of cybersecurity with 13485?
Yeah, I mean, more so now over the last few years, right? It really prior to that, I don't think it was is scrutinized, I guess. Now I've seen, and we've had feedback right from the FDA, um, where you really have to, and again, this comes back to risk, right? Patient harm, patient safety. Cybersecurity is a huge component of that now. So you really,
Hmm.
again, it's a pillar. This threat model, this risk assessment is a pillar of your quality management system. Um,
Yeah,
you I think a lot of people bolted it on right after the fact because I don't think it was
true,
a huge consideration originally. Now I really think
true.
it's the foundation of your quality management system. It has to be.
I, further to that, so let me ask you this question, Mike. Practically, if I'm a manufacturer, if I'm a startup who is going in the direction of coming up with an SAMD or a novel AI technology from a medical device perspective, at what stage do you think I need to start looking into my cybersecurity side of things as well? When would be the good time? When would be the right time for me as a founder of a medical device company to start even thinking about cybersecurity?
I think right, like immediately, right? So again, using that threat model as, and you know what, here's the thing, everybody has an idea what they want their product to do, right?
Yeah.
So they very specific, what problem are you trying to solve?
Mm-hmm,
As you're doing that, okay, here's how we're going to solve it, right? So now you're in
mm-hmm,
that kind of design
mm-hmm,
development.
mm-hmm,
Should we right away start looking at cybersecurity? Absolutely. If you try to bolt it on later, you're going to
mm-hmm.
have to go back and do some redesign, re-architecture. You're
True,
going to have to reevaluate risk. It's
true.
just going to slow you down. It's going to cost you a lot more money down the road. Do it early.
Absolutely,
Have it baked
absolutely.
into that initial as you get started.
I hope all the listeners are taking note on this. I can share one experience, although not on the software side, but on the hardware side of things, right, Mike? Similarly, we do. You might be aware of hardware testing that we do, the EMI, EMC, emission testing, safety testing, right? And uh, we used to always say that it is important for you to start having your design, keep in mind the IEC requirements, which are the regulatory requirements to when you design your PCBs and stuff. And so often than not, I have seen that people go for testing and they have to literally come back and go to the drawing boards and redesign the whole PCB. That's like literally putting 6 months of time and cost, efforts to get things done just because we did not do it in day one. I think same would be true even for cybersecurity. In my opinion, when you start thinking about your product, when you start defining your intended use, right, Mike, the intended use, I think that's when you need to start thinking about the cybersecurity side of things as well, security, privacy, whatever might be applicable to you, and how do you want to put your frame. You might not still be a 27001 compliant company, but at least your foundation would have everything inculcated so that tomorrow, even if you want to go for 27001, it shouldn't be a big deal for you, right? It should be part of your ongoing activity, right? Yeah, practically startups are always in this mindset of time crunch and things like that. But as you rightly mentioned, if it has not been taken care of on day one, you are going to lose your 10th, 12th, 11th, 12th, 13th day just to solve all of that, right? So might as well do it today than doing it tomorrow. And by the time you might have got a good response from the market, your VCs are sitting on top of your head, all sort of pressure on you, and you're trying to now fix the issue becomes really tricky. So yeah, even I agree with you, Mike. I think it's very, very important that cybersecurity should be part of that initial foundation, the planning stage, right? In fact, right from the risk assessment that we do typically in as part of 13485 and the design and development plan that we define. So often than not, Mike, when I go for the audits, right, and I'm talking to companies and I'm looking at their design plans, they don't even have a deliverable which is pointing towards security. They don't even have a deliverable which talks about this is what we need to do as part of our cybersecurity requirements, right? Until unless there's a need for them to go for an FD approval. And now when you're going for an FD approval for a 510K or de novo, whatever that might be, you're looking at that E star, and then E star has a section which says security and interoperability, and then you start working on your things, right? So I think it's important because end of the day, if you're an SaMD, it forms your backbone, and if it is not strong, then everything is else is going to just is it just waiting to collapse.
Yeah, yeah.
Cool. Going back, Mike.
Varun, can we touch on we talked about cybersecurity and design and development. What about post market, right? So now
Post.
you've got your product out there. Now what do you do? How do you
I Yeah,
how do you patch?
absolutely.
How do you get a new release of your product out? So
Mike,
I
my
think
product my
that's
product is
definitely
already
good
in the
as well.
market.
What's that?
I think the answer to that would be my product is already in the market. I'm making money. Let me just take care of that.
You don't have to worry about it
But
now.
no,
It's done. Yeah,
but
yeah.
I think it's very important. Thoughts.
Yeah, so I think you have to have a plan for that as well in the beginning. Otherwise, you're going to be scrambling trying to figure out, okay, now what do we do? How do we support this going forward? You want to, especially as a startup, right? You want to be aggressive. You want to be nimble. You want to get your product out there as quickly as possible. But if you don't, again, you don't have to take these considerations and you don't address cybersecurity early, you're going to be scrambling to try to figure it out later. Same thing post-market,
True.
right? You have to have a plan from the beginning on how to manage that device post-market, post-deployment.
So true, so true. I mean, post-market surveillance, post-market processes, right? May it be feedback, complaint, or active vigilance, right? Uh, is such a big is such a key, Mike, and so often than not, we see companies, because the mindset is, hey, you know what? Now I have my 510K, or now I have my C certificate, or the CDSU approval. I'm in the market. Nobody's asking question, and then we are able to sell and make money out of it. And you're just waiting for that one issue to pop up, and that might be the reason for the entire thing to fall apart, right? So yeah, I agree. Post market surveillance, Mike, very important point. Should not be diluted, should not be left out. In fact, for the whole CE process, right, when you go for your CE marking process, post market surveillance separately is a line item that has been called out, and there are requirements that the companies have to meet for that, right?
Yeah, and
Great. One more
cybersecurity
question.
should be part of that. It should be
Part of that, absolutely,
an integral
absolutely,
part of that.
absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolutely. As I said, right, Mike, whenever you talk about any of your plans, right, when you talk about design plan, or when you talk about post market plan, I think there has to be a separate line item within those plans talking about cybersecurity, right? Uh, what it might be doing rigorous testing, it might be doing continuous testing, it might be reviewing your processes, whatever it might be, right? But I think that has to, even in your internal audits, right? If you see typical internal audit schedule, or even if you're part of any of the 13485 audits and stuff, right? You don't see the auditors putting a lot of focus on cybersecurity, right? Although it is a baked in thing within your design and development process, right? Cybersecurity is baked into your design and the development process typically, but you don't see a lot of focus being. And I hope that changes with time. I hope auditors are more vigilant and looking into cybersecurity, and not just waiting for 27001 auditors to keep coming and asking, because eventually it is part of the medical device, right? So 13485 should also have that jurisdiction to question people on their security practices.
yeah. I don't see a lot. Again, cybersecurity really isn't touched on as much. I think it's, again, more now than it was maybe 3 years ago. Auditors are
True.
focusing on it. Certainly, the FDA is focusing on it. CE, European CE, they're focusing on it. So I do think it will continue to be something that that evolves, I guess, over the years, and especially now with AI, right? So you're going to have some additional requirements around AI that we didn't have in the past.
Tell me one thing, Mike. When you now that you spoke about AI, and Anumana is also all about AI, right? If I if I look at AI products, right, if I and in the process of making a model, training, testing, all of that, right, data identification, all that, where which are the few areas in the entire development process where you think is the are the areas where security elements have to be the strongest in the entire process? I understand in general it should be strongest, but which are those critical steps in the AI development process that, according to you, you feel that, Varun, these are the places where security measures have to be the strongest?
Yeah, I think especially if you're developing something like a machine learning algorithm, right? So
Mhm.
something you're going to want to ensure that the integrity of that model. So there's governance around who has access to the training data, what training data is being
Mhm.
provided, how you're validating the model. There's a lot, right, that's going to go into that, and you're going to want to program around that, right? Documentation, some governance around that AI ML program. You're seeing a lot, but
Mhm.
there's certifications out now, right? IAGP has there's a new AI governance and professional program, right? That I've actually gone through and
Mhm.
certified in. You're going to see more of those, so that there are individuals within the organizations that are really responsible for ensuring that certain policies, procedures, controls are implemented strictly around your use of AI, whether it's, you're developing a large language model or you're developing a very specific machine learning algorithm. You do have to have that governance in place.
Mike, one couple of questions before we can conclude the session. But one thing, so you're aware of this the new AI quality management system or the AI management system, the ISO 42001, right, 42001, which is coming in. So on one side you have this ISO 42001, then you have 27001, then you have the FDA's guidance document, then you have EU coming up with their own EU AI Act, and what all is happening, right? All of this thing while it is coming and trying to in a way strengthen the regulatory framework, right, if I can say that. But don't you think it is also in a way adding to maybe confusion as to, again, I as a startup, or I as a mid-sized company who is trying to develop, and now suddenly there are so many things that I have to start looking into, right? I don't even know, should I go for 42001, 27001, FDA guidance document, EU AI Act, right? Again, some of these questions might be answered because based on the region that you want to target or go into. But do you think that having so many standards framework is also somewhere adding to complications on how to deal with cybersecurity or things around that again?
Absolutely, absolutely. It is confusing, but again, business driven. So, if you're a startup, I suggest figuring that out early. Again, where do you want to do business? Where do you plan to do business? Find some frameworks that are going to meet the requirements of being able to do business in those areas with the type of device or software that you're trying to sell. And again, doing that mapping, use the technology, right? I'm all about using now generative AI, LLMs. They're really good at analyzing all of that information and helping you to at least come up with a mapping or a matrix that says, if you implement this control, you're going to meet the standards for this, this, and this, right? And
Okay.
that's really all you're going to be able to do. You're going to get, it's never going to be perfect. Standards are going to constantly change. And this is again, even developing policy standards, it's iterative. They're going to have revision A, revision B, revision
Yeah.
C to these standards. It's iterative, and that's just like cybersecurity. It's continuous. You're going to have to continue to take a look at what these standards and frameworks are, making sure you're covering them. If you're evaluated against those, whether it's from a compliance regulatory standpoint, you're going to have to do that. It's confusing and it's challenging, but use the
Awesome.
technology,
Mike,
and really understand what your business is, right?
makes sense. Great. And Mike, I think we're just coming to the conclusion of our session for today. But what are your final thoughts for especially startups, young startups which are coming up with new technology? What are your final thoughts for them? What are your suggestions? What are the few do's and don'ts from you that you can share with these companies that are coming up with new technology?
Yeah. So start cybersecurity and any of the AI governance, start it right at concept. Do it in your design, have it baked in right from the beginning. If you try to go back and bolt this on later, it's going to cost you time and money. Do it initially. And then really just, again, figure out a set of controls and standards that you want to conform with. 27,001 is a great start for your organization. If you're going to do software as a medical device, you want a quality system, 1345. AIML, right? 42,001. So there are risk register, 14,971. So there are certain standards that are fairly common. You start with a base framework, again, like 27,001, and you do that cross mapping. I think if you start that from day one, you will have success.
I think you summed it up so nicely, and I think the primary key point for me and what I'm going to keep advocating is to start as early as possible, and not at the day when your product is already in the market, or your trials have seen some good results and you want to start making money. I mean, it's all always good to make money, but yeah, I think that's the key input, Mike. Start as early as possible. Have some baseline standard like maybe 27001 or HIPAA, based on which geography you're looking at, and then start building your processes, your controls as you move towards finalization of your product. Great. That was amazing, Mike. Thank you so much for being part of this session. I think I learned personally few things today in this session. But thank you so much for being part of this session. Thank you so much for sharing insights on cybersecurity, and I'm pretty sure that our listeners are gonna learn few things today.
Always good talking with you, Varun. Always.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, guys. Until we meet next time, we'll be back. We'll be back with new sessions. If there is anything that you guys want to reach out, have any questions, or you want to get some clarity, please feel free to reach out to us on our LinkedIn. Until we meet again, we'll be back. If there is any suggestions that you guys have on what we can talk next, please feel free to do share your suggestions, and we'll try to look into that and then come up with our next session. Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you so much. Thanks, Mike.